cyber risk has really ceased to be a single incident event. So we're here with a panel of experts to take a deeper and wider look at cyber risk and how it can impact not only an enterprise, its board, and its shareholders, but also impact at a global level. When we look at the World Economic Forum Global Risks Report, we see that cyber dependency is the third largest trend in terms of the global development over the next 10 years. And when we think about it, shouldn't it be the first? When we see the increasing interconnectivity of this risk and how cyber can cascade not only across an enterprise, out through suppliers and vendors, but all the way out into critical infrastructure, really shouldn't it be much higher up?
The global nature of cybersecurity, there used to be this concept of a physical perimeter, right? But basically, your perimeter now exists wherever your employees happen to be with their handhelds, or wherever the third-party vendors and suppliers happen to be in whatever country.
I think in the past, it's been considered, cyber risk has been considered an IT thing, but it seems to be growing beyond just the IT realm and spreading throughout the organization.
It's not something that can be handled in IT anymore because the impact goes across the enterprise. In fact, I'd like to think a little bit beyond just data loss, which is what always makes the headlines. In fact, what we see as the largest impact is maybe a business blackout, or say a digital disruption where something occurs that breaks the availability of resources in a company, and that's where we see the broadest impact.
There are many breach incidents that have occurred recently that are directly attributable to third parties and the supply chain. So I agree that it's not just wholly an IT issue the way people have a tendency to think about it in the past. It's much broader than that.
And on top of that, not just being an IT issue, a lot of companies think that no one will ever go after me. And so they don't prepare and have an incident response plan in place or business continuity plan in place in the event that cyber risk does hit them.
The mantra that this is not just a server room issue, this is a boardroom issue, has really caught on. Public company directors should not think that they can't grapple with these questions. Public company directors can grapple with these questions and should. So what's important in the boardroom is having a translation function, and part of that is making the circle bigger. If you just have the directors and IT security folks in the room, you're going to end up talking about which box we just bought to solve this problem. If you have the lawyers in the room, if you have the HR folks in the room, if you have the CFO in the room at the same time, you can tilt that conversation to questions that boards have been answering since time immemorial. My preference is to have the company, in its own business judgment, determine whether it needs someone with an IT background on its board of directors. The board knows that as part of good corporate governance and to satisfy their fiduciary duties, they have to keep close watch over the corporation's assets.
And those assets are very often digital assets and intellectual property that's often digital, correct?
I agree with you. As we move more and more of what's valuable onto our networks, the company has to really think about what it is that it's trying to protect.
Well, in fact, Forrester estimates that about 90% of the Standard & Poor's market value is intangible assets. And by nature, those are things that are very susceptible to cyber, right? You talk about brand reputation and intellectual property theft and goodwill and things of that nature. To put it in context, in 1975, 17% of the corporate value was in intangible assets.
What Gus said is really true, and a good cybersecurity program begins with identifying exactly what's at risk, and a lot of companies miss that.
Right.
But that's really the first step. You have to know what you're protecting before you can protect it. And not only knowing what those assets are, but then doing an assessment of the risk associated with each one of those so that you can put the proper protections in place.